Yo, what's good with you? Back in black with another Enlisted video. If you guys are new to the channel and you love shooting games just like me, make sure you aim for that like button and shoot that subscribe button as well. It'll help you find better teammates and improve your skill-based matchmaking. At least I hope so. Today we are comparing all the BR2 rifles for the Western Axis and Enlisted to see which of them is the best for you in your particular playstyle. First up, we got the pre-war Car 98K, which as one could easily surmise is just an older version of the regular Car 98K from BR1, but the main difference with the pre-war version is going to be the iron sights, which lack a hood over the front post, which in theory is supposed to reduce the glare from the sun, making target acquisition easier. Since this is a BR2 weapon, you should also expect the base stats to be better, so taking a look at that, we are getting a tied for second best in tier max damage at 22.1, which is exceedingly strong for second place, and even out to 100 meters, we're still doing a deadly 17.3 per shot. Bullet velocity is also the same as the regular Car 98K and tied for second best in the tier at 750 meters per second. One of the more important stats with a bolt action rifle is always going to be the rate of fire, which in this case is going to be third best in the tier at 60 rounds per minute, which is very solid for a rifle generally speaking, only beat out by one other bolt action in this tier and one semi-auto rifle. The pre-war Car 98 shines by having a tier best reload speed at 3 seconds flat, so clearly your soldier runs around with the stripper clip already in his hand ready to reload at a moment's notice. And to make this rifle even better, we're getting a tier best shot deviation at 12, so you can feel free to spam those shots as fast as you can chamber them for quickly taking down entire squads, or at least most of them. I almost forgot to mention that out of all 6 rifles I'll be mentioning today, there are only 3 that feature a bayonet to help you out in close range fighting, and this is one of them. Transitioning into a more subjective portion of my analysis, we now gotta talk about the iron sights, which like I said earlier contrasts with the regular Car 98 in the lack of a front post hood, which in terms of gameplay doesn't really have much of a negative impact on your aiming. Basically, if you can aim good with the regular car, then this one should be just as good, if not slightly better. The only thing I can say about it negatively is that sometimes it takes a little longer for me to track horizontally moving foes across my screen, or I'll miss the first shot due to the rear sight guard slightly obstructing the target for like half a second, but still pretty good overall, and I'd argue these are probably the best sights in tier 2, definitely top 3. The only other thing I'd like to say about this rifle subjectively is that even if I'm aiming and strafing left or right slightly, I still manage to hit a large portion of my shots, which makes me feel good to know that I can still maneuver my soldier to be hard to hit while still shooting a straight bullet more often than not on my side. Moving on to contestant number 2, we shall now take a look at the Carcano M1891. And before I get started, as a quick disclaimer, as of today recording this video, Enlisted actually released an update stating that they were going to drop this rifle down to BR1. So I was kind of conflicted as towards whether I actually wanted to include this portion of the video, but I thought about it and I kind of already got the gameplay and I already chopped everything up, so you know, fuck it, whatever, right? Also, before I get started, I also wanted to say that I misspoke in my BR1 Western Axis rifle video, because this Carcano variant is actually the one that was the main battle rifle of the Italian forces during World War II. But aside from all that, thanks to its Mannlicher style 6-round stripper clip, this rifle is tied for second largest mag size in the tier at 6 bullets fully loaded. Not only do we have more kill potential per reload, we also retain our close range boost of having a bayonet, and we get an increase to our max damage, going up to a tier best 22.4 per shot. And even out to 100 meters, we're looking at a damage of 18.6, which is still outstanding. So if you can hit your target, the odds of them standing back up is basically negligible. We'll talk about how easy hitting a target is with this rifle a little later, but we do have some downsides to offset the higher than usual damage and mag size. Not as impactful of a stat, but still something you kind of hate to see on a rifle. Our bullet velocity is going down to a second worst in tier 660 meters per second, which means at longer ranges you'll have to lead your shot more than usual, and it'll seem like the bullet will take ever so slightly longer to hit the target. Most notably on the negative leaning stats, we are going down to a worst in tier fire rate at 48 rounds per minute, and not gonna lie, that's a little gut wrenching once you get down in the 40s. Not only that, we're also getting a tier worst reload speed at 3.5 seconds. The only other neat stat from a positive perspective is the second best in tier shot deviation at 13, so thankfully the bullet grouping will be tight even if you spam. Subjectively and aesthetically though, when it comes to the iron sights, they're more or less indistinguishable from the BR1 variant, and thus I retain the same opinion that these are quite possibly the worst sights in the tier, mainly due to the rear sight guard being so obtrusive and bulky, making it excessively harder to track horizontally moving targets or really anything that's not already lined up in front of you. When you couple this with the pressure of somebody shooting back at you, it just causes the slower target acquisition or more misses, which can get you killed if you don't go out of your way to play back further than usual with this rifle, and really take your time aiming without the immediate threat of getting shot yourself, which is cool on defense but maybe not so much on offense. Also, since the bullet velocity is so low, in my mind I feel like it makes more sense to get closer where I won't need the shot lead as much, and the bulky iron sights won't affect me as much either. But then again, at that point you're not really taking advantage of the increased max damage, so quite the conundrum contrasting how the stats imply you should play and how the aesthetics of the iron sights plus the bayonet makes me actually want to play with this rifle. Coming up for our third rifle of the day is the ever so rare French Moz 36, which I rarely ever see anybody use, but this is a short carbine style rifle with a 2-piece stock and slab-sided receiver. From a damage perspective, we're getting a second worst in tier maximum of 20.1, and out to 100 meters that'll go down to 15.7, which is still pretty strong. But as I say in many of my other rifle videos, whenever you see the word carbine, you know that rifle is meant to be used in closer range combat than your typical rifle. So with that being said, not to make it sound like a complaint, but it kind of behooves and surprises me that we are also getting a best in tier bullet velocity at 800 meters per second, which is stellar, allowing you to stretch this rifle out as far as you want with minimal shot leading required at any point in usage, provided you can see or hit the target, which we'll touch on in a second. But concerning the rate of fire, we're going down to a 4th best in tier 57 rounds per minute, which is pretty decent, I suppose, to make up for being in the middle of the pack in that regard. You may be happy to know that this rifle is the last of the three that actually retains a bayonet, along with the Carcano and the pre-war Car 98. Anyways, the reload speed on the Maz is second best in tier at 3.1 seconds, so more reason to use it up close, I'd say. Shot deviation sits at third best in the tier with a stat of 15, which of course isn't the best, but isn't too shabby in any way, shape, or form, especially if you're playing in the implied optimal ranges, which it looks like for this weapon is going to be medium to close range. A big reason I feel that to be the case has a large part to do with the iron sights, which are also in the running for worst in the tier due to the 3 really tall front posts that blocks most of any target that you're looking at. It's a shame really, because in a way it almost negates the point of the 800 meter per second bullet velocity when you make it so hard to see further out targets, especially factoring things like foliage, in-game sunlight, and the occasional useful soldier uniform camouflage or the shadows in this game. Best off not even try to take advantage of the bullet velocity and just close the gap if you're actually going to use this rifle. Coming up fourth, we gotta take a look at the Mannlicher M1895, which is most adorned for its direct action pull bolt system, which allows for a relatively high fire rate by the game standards at 66 rounds per minute. But I think it's fair to say that relatively is a very poor choice of words, because this baby actually has the second highest rate of fire in the tier, only beat out by a semi-automatic we'll get to a little bit later. But as a sidebar, you can turn this weapon into even more of a fire rate machine with investment in the bolt cycling speed perk for your soldier, but that's neither here nor there. Max damage for the Mannlicher is going to be third best in the tier, coming in at a 22 flat, but that's literally only 0.1 lower than the second place category, and clearly the 100-meter damage is also 0.1 lower at 17.2. They didn't specify in the weapon description, but I'm pretty sure this is the shorter carbine version of this weapon, and as such it makes more sense that our bullet velocity is going down to 700 meters per second, which is also going to be third best in the tier, but still very serviceable if you decide you want to be using this weapon for longer range fights. Reload speed on the other hand is on the lower side, coming in at a second worst in tier, 3.4 seconds, so make sure you play around cover always, or make sure you get at least one of those reload speed perks as well. Shot deviation is fourth best in the tier, coming in at 16, so ever so slightly worse than the MAS 36, which again won't matter if you're using the weapon in medium range and trying not to spam all 5 of your bullets at any targets you see at long range. In regard to the iron sight for the Mannlicher, I find them to be very simplistic, but I mean that in the most flattering way possible, because with that simplicity we get almost perfect functionality at all ranges. I had almost no issues tracking vertically, horizontally, or diagonally moving targets. Maybe the notch in the middle could be a little deeper, or perhaps the front post could be a smidge longer, but I literally cannot think of anything bad to say about my aiming experience with this rifle, and any misses that you see were basically caused by shot deviation, hip firing, or just human error via bad eyesight. As a fun fact, the recoil on the Mannlicher, especially the carbine version, was notorious for being absurd in real life, but as we know in the context of the game, recoil on bolt action rifles doesn't really matter much, but I did want to mention that from my research. Coming up for our fifth rifle of the day, we now got to take a look at the Armaguerra Model 39, which is going to be most unique for the simple fact that this is the only semi-automatic rifle that you can actually get your hands on in this tier. And of course that feature in itself is going to provide a big boost to anybody who has a disdain for bolt action rifles in general, or just somebody who likes spotting up close majority of the time. But of course with that ability comes some trade-offs, so we are going down to a tier worse max damage, coming in at 11.3, which is still pretty good for a lot of one-hit kills and downs if you're fighting up close and personal. But out to 100 meters we're dropping down to 9.3, and since the damage is going under 10, you can expect a need for a lot of follow-up shots to finish your targets unless you hit them in the head. This is something that you want to be super wary of, considering that your mag size only goes up to a maximum of 6, which means with that semi-automatic capability, you will see those bullets leave your gun faster than you can even say the name of the weapon. Speaking of how fast this weapon can shoot, this gun has a tier first fire rate going up all the way to 320 rounds per minute, which obviously trumps every other rifle in comparison, so this would be highly recommended for objective clearance due to the follow-up shot ability. Another reason you will want to close the gap or wait for enemies to get closer to you with this weapon is the tier worst bullet velocity going down to 630 meters per second, which is very noticeable after using all the other rifles in this tier. Expect lots of shot leading on top of having to shoot a person 2 to 3 times to confirm the kill if you try to engage anybody running across your screen more than 50-ish meters out. Reload time is mediocre for a self-loading rifle, coming in at third best at 3.2 seconds, which kind of puts you out of commission very often since you'll be reloading a lot. But I will mention that the alternative reload is a smidge faster, so if you find yourself with downtime, I'd always refill my mag to avoid that pitfall, along with getting some reload speed perks as well if you can. Something else that's very important on this rifle, you know, is meant for spamming anyways, is going to be the shot deviation, which is also worst in the tier at 30, which means that you really want to emphasize taking your time between shots unless somebody is right in front of you, because for any other situation you decide you want to shoot as fast as you can, the first bullet will go straight and then the next one is going to go to the moon by jurisdiction of the game. So try to slow down your shots for medium range. Unlike bolt actions with weapons that allow you to shoot repeatedly or automatically, recoil is more of a factor, so I'd be remiss not to mention the astounding vertical recoil stat of 84 and the horizontal recoil stat of 24, which will throw you off pretty bad when you shoot bullets in quick succession. This is even more apparent when your soldier doesn't have any recoil mitigation perks, so for that reason it's even more important for you to pace yourself between your shots, and it's almost 100% necessary to invest in the vertical recoil reduction if you plan on using this rifle on a consistent basis. The iron sights on the Armaguerra are pretty solid, I say, not the best and not the worst. I will say it's a little more obstructive on the right side due to the adjustment knob, and if not for the lackluster damage and the decent recoil, I could definitely see myself dropping lots of targets with ease no matter the movement pattern or the range. But alas, this gun is pretty weak at long range, so generally speaking, I guess overall, for lack of better words, pretty fun to use under the right circumstances for sure. You just gotta know what you're doing with it. Coming up for our last rifle of the day, we shall now analyze the more makeshift VG2, which is a late war Volkssturm rifle featuring a Gewehr 43 10-round magazine and a fixed sight for close range shooting. So even in the description you can kinda see how they're trying to nudge you to use this weapon. As you also heard in the description, I think the most unique thing about this weapon is going to be that it has the largest magazine capacity of any weapon in this tier at 10 rounds per mag, giving you a much better kill potential than any other weapon before you have to reload. This is compounded more so when you see that the max damage is tied for second place in the tier at 22.1 and still does a hefty 17.3 out to 100 meters. Bullet velocity is also tied for second place in the tier at 750 meters per second. On the downside though, our reload speed is fourth best in the tier at 3.3 seconds, which kind of makes me chuckle because when you think about a mid-war box magazine, it would make more sense if it would be faster than manually loading a bolt action rifle. But I realize they're kind of just talking about the empty reload if you fire all of your bullets, because if you do the alt reload it will be much faster by comparison because you are just taking out the magazine and inserting a new one. So make sure you alt reload whenever you can. In regard to the last important stat for this rifle, despite the extra bullets, some of them may be wasted if you spam, since we have a tier second worst shot deviation at 19, which is crazy to be at almost 20 for a bolt action rifle, but it kind of plays into that makeshift in-war desperation that we knew the Germans were kind of facing from a fantasy perspective, I guess, or I guess trying to go back in time perspective and, you know, put yourself in their shoes. So I guess I won't hate on it too much. But in regard to the iron sights on these rifles, I'm actually quite a fan of these, which is kind of ironic for me to say because as a whole, I do think this weapon is quite ugly, but as far as the aesthetics and functionality for aiming, this one is definitely in the upper echelon of this tier, giving me a ring for the front post that's not too closed but not too open, and a nice rear sight that's not too obstructive on either side, and has a nice deep cut in the middle to help me line up my target. I can say the description is accurate again on this one because it's not so great for super long range shooting, but if you're trying to capture or play around objectives, that won't really matter too much, and the 10-round magazine should definitely come in handy. So overall, looking at all 6 of these rifles, I believe I have a good idea of how I want to rank each of them for overall effectiveness. Coming in last, I gotta go with the Carcano M1891. The damage on this rifle is top notch, I will admit, but when you think about it from the aspect of having the worst fire rate, the worst reload speed, and the second worst bullet velocity, on top of arguably having the worst iron sights in the tier, all of these negatives dogpile on the gun, putting a damper on what positive attributes existed, and even the devs kind of seem to agree, which is why I'm pretty sure they're dropping this gun down to BR1 soon. Coming in 5th place after much deliberation, I ended up placing the MAS-36 here. I think there's a reason you and I rarely ever see anybody use this gun, and I think a lot of that has to do with simply how unattractive and inconvenient it is to aim with this weapon. The tall triple front post looking through the aperture is very disgusting to work with anything outside of close range, which again negates the benefit of the 800 meter per second bullet velocity, but I still say it's pretty comparable with the Carcano for the worst iron sights in the tier. Coming in 4th place, this is where it starts to get a little bit tight for me, but I think I'm going to have to reluctantly place the Mannlicher M1895 here for a couple of reasons. The fire rate on this bolt action rifle is great, but the fire rate only increases in importance as you get closer to the target. And in the same vein, as you get closer to your targets, I can begin to think of other rifles that I would rather recommend than this one. And then when you think about it from a long range perspective, there's still better rifles that I could recommend. So unfortunately, the Mannlicher could not end up cracking the top 3. But winning bronze for this tier, I have to go with the VG2 with that very lovely 10-round magazine. For those squads that you run into that have more than 5 people, this weapon will actually be a godsend, and the alt reload that you can do before the entire magazine is empty is pretty great too. Although the gun is ugly, the sights are pretty good and the stats match for second best in a lot of categories, and you can stretch this weapon out pretty far with the bullet velocity as well. The only con that really presents itself with this rifle is going to be the shot deviation and the rechambering speed, so I highly recommend getting a perk for that if you can. In second place, I believe that should comfortably go to the Armaguerra Model 39 due to being the only semi-auto capable rifle in the tier, which like I said should help you excel at close range like no other rifle in the category. And since it's dominating a niche like that, that should obviously allot it at least the top 3 spot, whether it be bronze, silver, or occasionally gold, but in this case I feel silver is pretty good. Coming in first place though, I believe that should go to the pre-war Kar98K. You could argue that the Mannlicher is faster, but it doesn't have the bayonet and it doesn't have the range. You could say the VG2 has more bullets, but it doesn't have the bayonet, nor does it have the accuracy, and it doesn't cycle bullets as fast, nor does it have iron sights that are as good. The Armaguerra is too niched out to be in first place because the effective range is too limited, so for being ranked in first or second excluding the fire rate plus having arguably the best sights in the entire tier while retaining a bayonet and having a nice crunchy sound when you shoot it, plus subjectively feeling like I'm able to strafe and shoot accurately at the same time, made me very comfortable putting the pre-war Kar98K in first place. But what do you guys think? At the end of the day, these are just my personal opinions, but I am hoping with the combination of my gameplay, my explanations, and your own personal preferences, you can help decide for yourself which rifle is best for you to spend your silver on buying over and over again, for equipping your soldiers, and for upgrading over and over again as well as spending your silver. If you found anything I said insightful or useful, or maybe you just enjoyed the gameplay, don't forget to aim for that like button and shoot that subscribe button as well. Help you find better teammates and improve your skill-based matchmaking. And yeah, if you know anybody who's playing Germany right now, maybe they just recently gotten the BR2, don't forget to show them this video, as I'm sure they'll find it very insightful or useful and be appreciative. And yeah, I appreciate you for watching, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Black Guy out.